This video is, once again, for entertainment purposes only. I am not certified to give legal advice, and as such, this video is not intended to do so. Alright, finally finished Judgment, so now I can get to making part 2. I think I'll take a bit of a break first. A special bonus movie has been unlocked. A special bonus movie? Okay then. Fuck you, Kamuro. If you're dumb enough to need an investigator this weekend, you're a big enough schmuck to come to Yagami Detective Agency. Bad deals, drunk detectives, Yakuza. If you think we'll solve your case at Yagami's, you can kiss my ass. It's our belief that you're such a stupid motherfucker that you'll fall for this bullshit. Guaranteed. If you find a better deal, shove it up your ugly ass. You heard us right. Shove it up your ugly ass. Bring your trade, bring your title, bring your wife. We'll fuck her. That's right, we'll fuck your wife. Because at Yagami Detective Agency, you're fucked 6 ways from Sunday. Take a hike to Yagami Detective Agency, home of Challenge Tiger Dropping. That's right, Challenge Tiger Dropping. How does it work? If you can Tiger Drop 10 people in a row and not get sued, we won't extort you. Don't wait, don't delay, don't fuck with us, or we'll rip your nuts off. Only at Yagami Detective Agency, the only agency that tells you to fuck off. Hurry up, asshole. This event ends the minute after you write us a check, and it better not bounce or you're a dead motherfucker. Go to hell! Yagami Detective Agency, Kamurocho's filthiest and exclusive home of the meanest sons of bitches in the nation of Japan. Guaranteed! To briefly outline the guidelines for Part 1, this video will be judging Yagami's crimes on the basis of US law. This is because I don't speak Japanese, and sources for US law will be much more readily available for me to research. This creates some conflicts, as laws can vary between states, but just like last video, whatever option is the funniest is the one I'll go with. A few extra things of note are that random encounters will not be tracked, as the amount you do can be different between playthroughs, and that objects destroyed in battle will not be counted, only ones that are destroyed within cutscenes, QTEs, etc. Finally, some of you guys actually commented a few corrections from the last video, which I will briefly mention before we get into things. The first is by Man Mason, who says, something of note at 1850. You technically don't have to gamble. You can just talk to the dealer, accept, then quit the table. But that's just semantics. Also, fantastic video. The second, by Jeffrey W901, states, you can avoid the property damage in the Shioya fight by failing the QTE. I honestly didn't think about doing either of these things in the last video, so thank you for pointing them out. The purpose of these videos is to see just how many crimes Yagami commits in a standard run of the game. And although you technically can skip both of these, and possibly more, I think this falls under the same idea of specifically playing the game in a way that lets Yagami plead self-defense. I wouldn't be able to tag team heat action an enemy through the air with Kaito if that wasn't something that Yagami wouldn't do on his own in a fight. Don't be discouraged from commenting if any crimes are skippable though. It's nice to see anything I missed during my playthroughs. Now with all that said, this video will be covering Chapter 7 through the finale, and be sure to stay tuned for the total list of crimes and the final sentencing at the end of the video. But, for now, Chapter 7 starts off right after Yagami's second Shioya beatdown during a discussion with Chairman Kashihira. They spend 20 minutes talking about plot stuff, and then when Yagami and Kaito leave Genda Law Office the next day, they get jumped. All of these guys have weapons, so I'll let Yagami have this one. To save you the lengthy explanation I had in Part 1 about how someone can be charged with assault and battery, just know that someone can only plead self-defense if they were in immediate danger, and only if they used proportionate force. Yagami and Kaito head to Lamode again, but there's no gambling this time. However, Mafuyu still hands Yagami some confidential police information on behalf of Ayabe, which would land Yagami a charge of corruption. Uh-oh! Yagami needs a favor from Saori, so he's gonna bribe her with some sweets. Yagami first hits up Tsukumo to use the cracked version of chatter on his phone. This happened twice in the last video, but to summarize, it's hard to pin down exactly what crimes Yagami and Tsukumo are committing here, but the only one that I can say concretely is unauthorized access to computer material, in which Yagami is an accomplice. Yagami tracks down the dessert shop owner to find that he's being intimidated by some Yakuza grunts. Yagami attempts to ignore them at first, but then threatens to call the police. This then starts a fight with them. I'm also willing to say that this is okay. The guy on the left pulls a knife on Yagami, and you could also argue that Yagami is protected under Good Samaritan law for protecting the shop owner. Then there's the whole Saori cabaret thing, and yeah, this section of the game doesn't really matter, so... While Saori is doing her thing, it's time for another side case! You have to go back to Turtle Financing for some information again. Like last time, there's the option to go beat up a Keihin leader, but we'll have Yagami pay up like a law-abiding citizen. The kid that I forgot to mention gets kidnapped, and Yagami goes to save him. A similar situation happened in Part 1, and the same rules apply here. You can have legal protection from certain charges in a situation like this, if you could prove that the hostage was in immediate danger, and that the only way to save them is to commit a lesser crime. Just like last time, the Yakuza guys are probably not going to hurt this little boy, and even if they were, Yagami still could have called the police instead. This gets him 7 counts of aggravated assault and aggravated battery. I'll also give him 1 count each of aiding and abetting for allowing Kaito to punch this guy in the beginning. And because Yagami says, "I'm kinda impressed this half-baked plan of his worked," I would go as far to say that he can get conspiracy charges for these as well. Yagami heads to Theater Square and gets confronted by Kasai, who has Sakakiba in tow. He sends him and some goons at you to fight. I definitely don't consider self-defense to be applicable here, so that's 6 more assaults and batteries. Yagami goes back to his office, but is stopped by Kuroiwa. They go inside, and Kuroiwa asks Yagami if he knows who stole the police records that Mafiu gave to him. He lies and says that he doesn't know. Lying to a police official is still an offense, even if the official isn't squeaky clean himself. 1 count of false reporting to law enforcement. Nothing else important happens for the rest of the chapter. But, starting like 30 minutes into Chapter 8, we get into the second fight with Higashi. It took me a minute to make a call in this scene, as it's unclear whether or not Kaito and Yagami could have escaped the situation before it escalated into a fight. That entire train of thought went down the drain when, towards the end of the cutscene, Kaito is shown to be inciting the fight. There's 13 guys in total, so 13 assaults and batteries. Yagami gets a flashback and decides to gather some more information on Kamuro. He, of course, immediately decides to wiretap the Matsugane office like any law-abiding citizen would. Yagami asks Tsukumo to make up some wiretaps, and Kaito tells him that in order to sneak in, he needs to steal some guy's drip. They find him, beat him up, and do as such. Yagami would get charged with aggravated assault and battery as usual, as well as theft. Finally, Yagami enters the Matsugane office to place the wiretaps. Now, despite Yagami placing what the game calls wiretaps, these technically are not wiretaps. Wiretaps are devices that are specifically meant to intercept and monitor electronic communications like phone calls and emails. Yagami has installed hidden microphones which would constitute the crime of eavesdropping. Yagami is also committing false impersonation and conspiracy to do so, as well as criminal trespass. Yagami gets his cover blown and has to fight 4 guys, 4 more for assault and battery. After listening in on the Matsugane office, he heads to Lamode to find someone who knows of a gambling hall where they might find Hamura. Long story short, this guy will tell you where the Chohan parlor is, but only if you can get some lady to talk to him. And the only way to do that is to beat her in poker. As stated in the previous video, Lamode is an illegal casino, and as such, participating in any gambling there could land you with an illegal gambling charge. Also, this instance of illegal gambling is unavoidable unlike the last one, as you have to play to progress. Yagami and Kaito go to the gambling parlor and find Hamura there. This initiates a fight with 10 guys, which, you guessed it, means 10 more charges of assault and battery. Kaito continues to hold down Hamura as Yagami tries to extract information from him. The use of force to do so is the act of coercion. The parlor soon gets torched, and Kengo tries to get rid of Yagami and Kaito with a grenade. They jump behind a bar, and the chapter ends. Yagami meets with Hattori for plot stuff, and spends the next 20 minutes in his office talking about more plot stuff. He then goes to meet Okubo in prison to talk about even more plot stuff for another 15 minutes, before we finally get to something interesting. Outside of Tender is the Cane Man boss fight, and it's a little tricky to tell if this is assault and battery or not. Obviously, if someone pulls a sword on you, you're definitely fulfilling the danger of serious harm or death part of the self-defense argument. However, Yagami definitely could have just left. This entire situation gets even more complicated if you factor in the later fights you have with Cane Man. It's shown that Cane Man can change his cane into a shotgun, which means Yagami probably can't just run away out of fear of getting shot. At the same time, there's no way that Yagami would know this, as this is the first time he's ever seen Cane Man. Then there's the fact that Cane Man is an assassin sent to kill him. So what if he has a hidden gun or is crazy enough to throw his sword at Yagami in order to kill him at all costs? It's surprisingly tough to make a call on, but despite Yagami being shown to basically accept K-Man into a duel anyway, I won't count assault and battery here. Yagami and Sugiura eventually head to the ADDC to find Shono. It doesn't take long before they're told to leave by the Vice Minister. They fail to do so, which is trespassing. The security guards take the two of them outside, and it turns out they intend to seriously harm both of them. While harming a security guard may or may not be a very serious offense depending on their status as an officer of the law, these guys aren't exactly following it themselves. While it can be legally allowed to defend a property from someone who is trespassing, Yagami and Sugiura are not trespassing anymore since they have left the property. As such, these security guards can no longer use force on them legally, which gives Yagami the right to defend himself since they are anyway. The scene immediately after, while seeming pretty bad on the surface, is actually far worse than you might think. But to fully understand why, we have to do a little digging. Recall back to the previous chapter where we had to steal Tashiro-kun's clothes. After beating him up and stripping him, Yagami tells Kaito to bring him somewhere because it's too cold to leave someone outside, naked. Judgment takes place in December of 2018, which is proven by Tashiro himself when you meet him again in the Kaito files. Japanese winters can range anywhere from 40 degrees Fahrenheit to well below freezing. Very deadly for a naked person. Yagami seems to forget this though, as we can briefly see two security guards stripped down to their underwear before they walk away. At best, this is grossly negligent on Yagami's behalf, and at worst, Yagami is willingly leaving these guards to die. This is the hardest verdict I've ever had to call for these videos, because there's evidence that supports both Yagami's intent to kill the guards and the lack thereof. Yagami not bringing the guards to a place they wouldn't freeze to death, even though he did for Tashiro, may prove that he does not care for their safety and is intentionally letting them die. But this could also be because they didn't have time to move them or something like that. He may be assuming that when all of the other guards get up that they'll help them instead, but that doesn't inherently disprove an intent to kill. As a lawyer, Yagami probably wouldn't want to kill someone, considering that he very much tries to uphold the law. But have you played this game? Yagami doesn't bat an eye when someone else kills someone he doesn't like. Spoilers! Yagami doesn't give a damn when Mr. Final Boss Man gets fucking firing squatted at the end of the game. Even in Lost Judgment, the only reason that Yagami cares when Akutsu gets killed is because he's part of the case that he's investigating. The guy would probably love to kill him if he could. But Curve, you may be saying, isn't Yagami's whole shtick in Lost Judgment that he doesn't think that vigilantism is the right answer for bringing criminals to justice? And you'd be absolutely correct. But I'm no longer convinced that he's in a place to make that call. This is the same guy that has assaulted hundreds of people who got in his way, no matter if they were a civilian, a Yakuza, or even a police officer. This is the guy who has worked with the same Yakuza, an organization that kills people every single day, and he never cared until it started involving him. This is the same guy who will use force and manipulation to get what he wants, and if it takes someone dying, so be it. What's one more to him anyway? In all seriousness, as much as I would love to charge Yagami with attempted murder, the evidence is circumstantial, and it's more likely that this is attempted involuntary manslaughter due to Yagami's negligence. Something else that is important to note is that false impersonation and impersonation of a peace officer are considered two different crimes. After much deliberation, I have concluded that these security guards are not police officers. In real life, security guards are usually not part of the police force, and are instead employed by private security companies. Any such company is not mentioned anywhere in the game, but I think it's likely that they still are, considering that the security guard uniform is different from the policeman uniform. To recap, just for this scene alone, Yagami would be charged with attempted involuntary manslaughter ×2, theft, false impersonation, and trespassing, for re-entering the building when they were already kicked out. The many-long battle through the hospital starts with 8 assaults and batteries, then 3 more, then another 3, before ending on a simple assault and battery with Shono. Not to mention 10 more simple assaults and batteries for pushing these people out of the way during the transitions. The following cutscene could land Yagami a charge of false imprisonment for keeping Shono in this room against his will, as well as harassment for his repeated and increasingly more extreme attempts to get in contact with him. Chapter 10 starts with yet another Peeping Tom violation. Thereafter is a whole tailing mission and chase with Higashi, but nothing happens. You're tasked with luring out the Matsugane family, and in the process, you fight 3 goons in front of a club. Yagami doesn't incite the fight, and one of them pulls a knife, so no crime here. Not to mention, he's also defending the club owner. The same thing happens with another group of guys, and there's still no crime. Yagami and Kaito meet up in the Champion District and get into a fight with 5 Matsugane guys. Yagami is, once again, legally allowed to defend himself in this circumstance, because he is outnumbered, and these guys do have weapons. There's another chase immediately after, where, like in the last video, Yagami jumps over some random guys on the sidewalk, 1 count of simple battery. In the following cutscene, Yagami shoves the man he was chasing to the ground. This is simple assault and battery. I explained in part 1 why jumping over the other guy is only battery and not assault, but to briefly summarize, assault is the threat of bodily harm being inflicted on someone, while battery is the actual infliction of said harm. The guy on the street had no idea Yagami was going to vault over him, but the guy Yagami was chasing probably thought he was going to be harmed if he was caught. Also, Yagami is currently in Little Asia, which is undergoing construction. Going into a construction zone without proper authorization is trespassing. Kaito gets shot and kidnapped, and you need to go rescue him. The same kidnapping rules that I said before apply here, or at least they would if Kaito was not in immediate danger. Yagami has reason to believe that Kaito is possibly about to die if he doesn't act quickly enough. So while Yagami would normally rack up a lot of assault and battery charges here in the following long battle, I'll let him off with this one. Just for fun, I'll still go through it anyway. He beats up some guys for 3 counts of assault and battery, and then it's just a building. Yagami picks a lock once he gets inside, which is breaking and entering. Not to mention that his presence there in the first place is trespassing. So in comes the Cane Man Gauntlet. I will only be counting Cane Man himself once, but any other grunts are fair game. The first fight involves him and 4 other guys. The second fight is just those same 4 again, so they don't count. The third is only Cane Man. The fourth has 4 new guys. The fifth 5. The sixth 3. The seventh 3. The 8th 5. The 9th 3, and finally, the 10th only has Cane Man. At last, Yagami reaches Hamura, and fights him for 1 more. That's 32 would-be counts each of assault and battery in total, as well as trespassing, breaking and entering, and maybe destruction of property because I have no idea where the chair went after the Hamura QTE. One thing that I can get Yagami for is pointing a gun at Hamura. This is after Kaito is saved, which no longer gives Yagami legal protections. Believe it or not, you can't just point a gun at someone for no reason. This could land Yagami a charge of aggravated assault and unlawful display of a firearm. Additionally, Yagami could still be charged with trespassing for remaining on the property after he has saved Kaito. And finally, Yagami would be found liable for kidnapping since he holds Hamura hostage and transports him to another building against his will. Chapter 11 begins with a 25-minute exposition dump where the only thing that happens is Yagami threatening Hamura to extract information, aka coercion. The building gets set on fire and Yagami has to escape. This is the start of another long battle. Yagami is within his rights to defend himself in order to escape the burning building, so no assault or battery here. More plot stuff happens, and then when Yagami goes back to his office, he gets jumped by Koga and his goons. Of course he wouldn't be found liable for defending himself, so all good here. Yagami wakes up the next morning to find that the mole has killed Shioya, and this very short chapter ends. Don't worry, chapters 12 and especially 13 will rectify this. Yagami goes to Matsugane's funeral to pay respects, then goes and does some stuff for Ayabe's case. Hattori says he needs to meet up with the chairman of the Kyorei clan, and they decide that they need to talk to Director Kido for some answers. How do they manage that, you may ask? Well, they set up a honey trap. Saori enters the ADDC to request a meeting with Kido while pretending to be a journalist. You're intended to get Kido as excited as possible during this segment, but either way, it ends with him sexually assaulting Saori. Sting operations like this, when done without proper clearance from law enforcement, can be a huge legal mess. At worst, Yagami could be charged with the solicitation of a crime for coercing Kido's assault. At the end of the day, though, no one forced Kido to sexually assault Saori, so no crime there. However, it is still an invasion of privacy to record Kido in the first place without his consent in an area that is deemed private. Thinking he's going on a date, Kido shows up to the Kamurocho batting center. Yagami and the gang show up to have a talk with him. which Kido is not a fan of. Like with Shono, his repeated attempts to get in contact with Kido against his will is a form of harassment. Kido then calls in some grunts to beat Yagami and the others up. Most of these guys have weapons, and Yagami is getting jumped anyway, so he's not breaking the law here. After the fight, Yagami says something pretty concerning. Lucky for you, nobody's dying today. But still, I suggest you learn a little humility. I never said I wouldn't hurt you. Believe it or not, you can't just threaten people and suffer no consequences. Kido would be reasonable in believing that Yagami is actually going to hurt him, which could land Yagami a criminal threats charge. The gang then take him to Charles, strip him of his clothes, and force him to spit up some information about 89. It goes without saying, but this entire situation is super illegal and will put Yagami in some seriously hot water. Notably, Yagami will be charged with the kidnapping of Director Kido, as well as extortion for using the incriminating video of him to blackmail him for information. He could also be charged with intimidation for obvious reasons. I'm not entirely sure if the kidnapping was planned or if it was a last-minute change of plan, but I can pin Yagami with conspiracy to extort as well. Yagami then threatens Kido again, this time with torture, which incites this very ironic line from Kido. Boy, do I have news for you. Continuing with Kido's interrogation, after Kido confesses that Shono was the one who killed Emi Terasawa, Sugiura loses his temper and goes to punch him. Yagami pulls him away, but even though Yagami did not want Sugiura to do that, he still placed Kido into a situation where he would be vulnerable to assault. A first for these videos, Yagami would be charged with being an accomplice to aggravated assault, but only simple battery, as, while there was a serious threat of harm to Kido, only minor harm was actually inflicted when Sugiura grabbed onto him. Towards the end of the interrogation, Yagami needs Kido to make a phone call to a guy named Ishimatsu in order to lead him to a secret lab. You end up following the guy in the worst tailing mission in the game, and finally find said lab. Yagami and Sugiura trespass onto the property, which makes them completely liable to all the upcoming assault and battery charges in the ensuing long battle. Speaking of, the first fight has 6 guys, the second 2, the third has 1, and so does the fourth. Yagami also commits a few other crimes along the way, those being destruction of property, for damaging the electrical lock on this door, breaking and entering, for picking this lock, and worst of all, Yagami finally gets a charge of attempted murder for throwing a broken police baton at the hangman while he is standing in a puddle of water. This explanation is about to get pretty lengthy, so sit tight. As you probably know, water is a fantastic conductor of electricity, and while electric police batons generally have a high voltage, they also have a low amperage to minimize lethality. The fact that the hangman is in water has the potential to make the electricity from the baton lethal. Even if this circumstance would not cause death with a real-life baton, this baton is not normal and is literally spewing visible electricity. Which leads me to believe that this baton may not be following standard regulations for electrical batons and is far more powerful than would usually be allowed. While it's impossible for me to find the exact amperage of this baton, it's likely much higher than other batons, and combined with the fact that the hangman is being electrocuted for around 2.5 seconds, I'm going to consider this an action that can result in probable death. Now, a murder charge, and, by extension, an attempted murder charge, requires the intent to kill. This is true under most circumstances. However, there are a few select scenarios in which an attempted murder charge can pass without the intent to kill. One such case is with constructive intent, otherwise known as implied intent. Constructive intent is a legal concept in which an outcome of a certain action is so obvious and so probable that the intent for that outcome is implied even if it is not expressly stated. The way this applies to murder is if a person knowingly does something to someone else in which death is so likely that it is an expected outcome, then in that scenario, they can still be charged with murder or attempted murder even if they had no intent to kill, because the intent is implied by the action. To put it more simply, say, for example, me and my friend decide to play a little game. My friend stands around 20 feet away from me, and I shoot him with a rocket launcher. You know, to see what happens. Unfortunately, my friend dies during the game, and I'm put on trial for murder. My lawyer tries to reduce it to a manslaughter charge by saying that we were just playing a game, and as such, I had no intent to kill my friend. The judge could maintain the murder charge in this case due to constructive intent. Firing a rocket launcher at someone is so dangerous that it's basically guaranteed to kill them, and I would be a fool for thinking that my friend wouldn't die from being hit by an explosive rocket. Even though I didn't express the intent to kill my friend, the intent is implied by me performing such a lethal act in the first place. Take that concept and transfer it over to Yagami's case. Throwing a Super Saiyan God shock baton into a puddle with someone standing in it is such a lethal act that the intent for Yagami to kill is implied by him performing such a dangerous action. Because of this, I will finally be charging Yagami with attempted murder by reason of constructive intent. Yagami and Sugiura finally locate the secret lab. They talk with Shono for a bit before Sugiura gets an attempted murder charge of his own. Yagami offers himself up to be arrested, but the chief prosecutor refuses. Kaito and Higashi get a visit from Kuroiwa, and the chapter ends. The final chapter begins with Yagami and the gang talking for a while before he receives a call from Mafuyu. She's being tailed again, and needs Yagami to be her bodyguard. This sparks another long battle, this time throughout Kamurocho. The first fight has 5 guys, although I'm like 80% sure that the 3 dudes in the intro are different from the ones that you fight. Yagami only directly attacks 2 of them, so the third one will just have him as an accomplice. Continuing on, the second fight has 5, the third has 3, the fourth 5, the fifth 4, and the sixth 8. You meet up with that detective guy that you stole from at the beginning of the game for plot stuff, and then head to Gendo Law Office to meet with Saori and Hoshino. Mafuyu sends Yagami to Cafe Mihore to talk with Prosecutor Izumida. This is a scene that's pretty difficult to make a call on. The two of them talk about the upcoming trial for Ayabe, where Yagami reveals that he intends to bring the entire situation with 89 to light. He needs Izumida's cooperation to do this, though, because he's the only one who could call Minister Ichinose as a witness. This isn't inherently bad and is all done in the name of justice. However, bringing up the entire 89 conspiracy would inevitably prove Ayabe innocent, which is exactly what Izumida is supposed to not be doing. Izumida agreeing to this plan could be considered collusion and the conspiracy to do so, in which Yagami would also be charged. I'm not 100% confident on this though, but hey, it's a new crime, so who cares. Side quest time! Before the real finale of the game starts, there are a couple side things we need to do. You can do these in any order, but I chose to go with Higashi first. He needs you to knock some sense into the guys in the Matsugane office. Yagami tries to talk Kingo and the others down to stop them from chasing the mole, but they aren't having it. Yagami tried to prevent this confrontation from happening, but even if he failed, he's still okay to defend himself here. The second one I did was going to see Kido with Hoshino. The only crime here is attempted extortion, for trying, but ultimately failing to blackmail Kido again. Finally, I chose to go see Okubo at the detention center. Of course, nothing happens here, so Yagami returns to Kamurocho and the true finale of the game begins. Yagami stops by Gendo Law Office one last time to discuss some things about Ayabe's trial. After a while, he's interrupted by a call from Mafuyu, saying that the police have raided Lamode in an attempt to sway the opinion on Ayabe. Yagami goes there, but is stopped by an officer out front. Morita tells the officer to let him in, and he goes inside. Because Yagami has the permission of Morita, I at first thought this would be okay for him to enter the crime scene, but Morita saying that he will take responsibility makes me think otherwise. In reality, while Morita is the chief prosecutor, he likely does not have proper authority to allow Yagami onto the scene. This may mean that Yagami is trespassing, but it's also possible that the blame would fall on Morita. I'm really not sure for this one, so I won't put Yagami at fault here. After talking to Morita downstairs for a while, Kuroiwa comes in and takes over. This starts a fight with him, which carries quite a few charges. Funny enough, Kuroiwa says before the fight that he won't arrest Yagami on obstruction charges, despite Yagami definitely being guilty of obstruction of justice for beating up an officer on a crime scene. Despite what Yagami says, Kuroiwa is indeed a police officer, which means that Yagami is guilty of assaulting and battering a peace officer. During the dynamic intro of the fight, Yagami knocks over a flower pot, which can be heard shattering. This is not only property damage, but since this is a crime scene, Yagami is technically tampering with evidence. The game skips ahead to 1 month later when Ayabe's trial is being held. The trial itself is a big mess of the aforementioned collusion, but the first actual crime that Yagami would be guilty of is contempt of court. Yagami willingly presents evidence to the court that has likely not been approved. The evidence in question is a recorded phone call between Ichinose and Hamura, which Yagami obtained from Hamura himself. It's possible that this evidence could have been approved by the court at some point in the 1-month time skip, but I'm still doubtful that it would be accepted due to it not necessarily being from a reliable source, and also because the evidence itself may be illegal. This is because in some, but not all jurisdictions, phone calls cannot be recorded without the consent of both parties, and I sincerely doubt Ichinose would have consented to being recorded. Even if for some reason this recording was accepted as evidence, I'm almost positive that Yagami leaving the courtroom without good reason and dumping everything onto Hoshino would place him under contempt of court. In an attempt to chase Kuroiwa, Yagami and the gang head to Theater Square. To try and stop them, a bunch of goons pick fights with them. The first fight has 8 guys, and the second has 13. Yagami trespasses on another crime scene, and then all 4 of the boys head to the ADDC for the final showdown. Yagami trespasses on yet another crime scene, resists arrest, and then thinks it's a great idea to start attacking all of these police officers. I counted 20 in total. Yagami and Sugiura then go upstairs to fight 7 more officers. In order to get through this gate, Yagami steals a keycard from a deceased officer and chases after Kuroiwa. The ADDC has some tanks of propane lying around for some reason, which Kuroiwa shoots to destroy the connecting hallway between the buildings. This causes Yagami to fall into someone's car. Remember, Yagami is trespassing, which temporarily voids him of some of his rights, so he would still be liable for property damage and reckless endangerment. Yagami and Sugiura once again attempt to enter the ADDC from the underground entrance. This time, Mashiko and some cops are waiting for them there. They, of course, get into a fight. Remember, Mashiko is not a police officer. Yagami only gets 4 counts of assault and battery on a peace officer, and 1 normal count of assault and battery. Yagami enters the building once again, which is still trespassing, and finally catches up to Kuroiwa.
Give it up, Yagami! If you can't even stand in court, then how could you stand in the way of AD9?
You're right, Kuroiwa. I am a fraud.
That's right. Now stand back and let me take your eyes like all the rest.
And you know what? I'm also a felon and a sham of a lawyer.
Yeah, okay, I get it.
But most of all, I'm
I'm a goofy goober!
Now, despite what this scene would lead you to believe, Kuroiwa is still a police officer, which means that Yagami is committing those corresponding assault and battery crimes. There isn't much else to the fight itself other than the phase transition where Yagami knocks Kuroiwa out of the window. Not only is this another property damage charge, but I would go as far as to say this is attempted voluntary manslaughter, since this very well could have killed him if he didn't grab onto something. And well, that's it. There's nothing left in the ending scenes after the fight. Now, before we get into the final list of crimes and Yagami's sentencing, I will very quickly go over what crimes Yagami has committed in this video, being corruption, aiding and abetting an unauthorized access to computer material, aggravated assault times 120, aggravated battery times 119, aiding and abetting aggravated assault times 3, aiding and abetting aggravated battery times 2, conspiracy to assault, conspiracy to batter, false reporting to law enforcement, theft times 3, eavesdropping, false impersonation times 2, conspiracy to falsely impersonate, criminal trespass, illegal gambling, coercion times 2, trespassing times 7, attempted involuntary manslaughter times 2, simple assault times 12, simple battery times 13, false imprisonment, harassment times 2, peeping Tom violation, unlawful display of a firearm, kidnapping times 2, invasion of privacy, criminal threats, extortion, conspiracy to extort, intimidation, aiding and abetting simple battery, property damage times 4, breaking and entering, attempted murder, collusion, conspiracy to collude, attempted extortion, obstruction of justice, assaulting a peace officer times 33, battering a peace officer times 33, tampering with evidence, contempt of court, resisting arrest, reckless endangerment, and attempted voluntary manslaughter. And now, the verdict. On the day of January 6, 2024, the defendant, Takayuki Yagami, has been found guilty of all of the following charges: Aggravated assault times 236. Aggravated battery times 235. Aiding and abetting aggravated assault times 4. Aiding and abetting aggravated battery times 3. Aiding and abetting an unauthorized access to computer material times 3. Aiding and abetting simple battery. Assaulting a peace officer times 33. Attempted extortion. Attempted involuntary manslaughter times 2. Attempted murder. Attempted voluntary manslaughter. Battering a peace officer times 33. Breaking and entering times 2. Burglary times 2. Coercion times 2. Collusion. Conspiracy to assault. Conspiracy to batter. Conspiracy to burgle times 2. Conspiracy to collude. Conspiracy to damage property. Conspiracy to extort times 2. Conspiracy to falsely impersonate times 2. Contempt of court. Corruption times 3. Criminal threats. Criminal trespass times 3. Disorderly conduct times 2. Eavesdropping. Extortion times 2. False impersonation times 3. False imprisonment. False reporting to law enforcement. Harassment times 3. Illegal gambling times 2. Intimidation. Invasion of privacy. Kidnapping times 2. Loitering. Obstruction of justice. Obstruction of traffic. Peeping Tom violation times 3. Possession of an illegal drug. Property damage times 6. Public intoxication. Reckless endangerment times 3. Resisting arrest. Simple assault times 13. Simple battery times 15. Tampering with evidence. Theft times 6. Trespassing times 10. Unauthorized access to critical infrastructure. Unlawful discharge of a firearm. Unlawful display of a firearm. Usage of an illegal drug. And violation of a sit-lie ordinance. I, Justice Curve Nasty Jr., hereby sentence the defendant to 16,060.5 years in prison, 1,650 of which are from assault and battery on a police officer, and 14,130 of which are from aggravated assault and battery.
This number is likely very inaccurate. It's basically impossible to get fully accurate information on the sentencing for many of these crimes, so I had to get creative. For aggravated assault and battery, I used the maximum sentencing that I could find, which was 30 years, and multiplied it by 471. For 236 assaults and 235 batteries. Accomplices to crimes generally receive lighter sentences than the primary perpetrator. So for all aiding, abetting, and conspiracy versions of crimes, I went with the minimum sentencing instead. Mines are an entirely different story with even less information, so I won't even be attempting to try and calculate that, but it would likely be in the billions. Some of these crimes carry the maximum punishment of a life sentence. Life sentences are exactly that. Imprisonment for the rest of the offender's life unless they're pardoned, released under parole, or have their sentence relieved under any other circumstance. Life sentence doesn't exactly give a concrete number of years, but in the majority of cases, a prisoner must undergo 25 years of a life sentence before being eligible for parole. So for the sake of having a big number, I will treat a life sentence as 25 years. Yagami's attempted murder of hangman would count as an attempted second-degree murder, which is a lighter sentencing in first degree. 9 years max according to the South California law group. Most information comes from their site as they have a lot of information about sentencing. This raises some problems such as breaking and entering not being its own crime in California. In this case, I will simply give it the same sentence as burglary. All burglary charges are second degree, which is burglary of a store or business, and it carries a lighter sentence. Coercion is charged the same as extortion as they're very similar crimes. Conspiracy to assault and conspiracy to batter are treated as a minimum sentencing for aggravated assault and battery. I couldn't really find anything on collusion and its conspiracy charge, but the only thing I could find said 5 years. Property damage charges are based on the vandalism sentencing, as they're essentially different names for the same crime. Vandalism has different levels depending on the monetary value of the property that was damaged/destroyed, but between not knowing how much any of the stuff Yagami destroyed costs and the fact that I don't feel like going back and estimating, I'll treat all of them as felony vandalism charges. For legal purposes, false personation is the same thing as false impersonation. Corruption and bribery are charged as the same crime. Criminal trespass is treated as second-degree burglary. I couldn't find anything concrete on harassment, but it's generally seen as a misdemeanor, which usually has a 1-year sentence. Only thing I could find on intimidation was on Wikipedia, which said 10-year sentence. It's probably wrong, but I also don't have anything else to go on, so we'll roll with it. Obstruction of justice is charged as resisting arrest. Obstruction of traffic is no information, so I charge it as 6 months. Nothing specific on reckless endangerment, but something said 7 years, so we'll roll with it. Tampering with evidence is charged as destroying evidence. Theft charges are charged as petty theft. I'm gonna be real, I don't even know if unauthorized access to critical infrastructure even exists, so we're just gonna put it under regular unauthorized access. Unlawful display of a firearm is charged under brandishing. Sit-lie violation is charged under loitering. All this basically doesn't matter because big number equals big dopamine.
You better appreciate all the work I do for these videos. Well, after many months, I've finally reached the bottom of this crazy rabbit hole. Like last time, all of this is probably wildly incorrect in some form. If you have any corrections, be sure to let me know down in the comments. While you're there, let me know if you want me to cover Lost Judgment as well, although that likely wouldn't be for a very long time. If you've checked part 1 recently, you may have noticed that I changed the title. This is because the word crimes is apparently bad for monetization and overall discoverability in the algorithm. I noticed that part 1 seemed to abruptly plateau in views, and this may have been the cause. If you will, please like, comment, and subscribe to help my videos get out in the algorithm. I would really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.